the UFC 290 this week, Las Vegas, Nevada. International Fight Week. This is usually the card that Dana and the UFC that they stack. They make one of the best cards of the year. And honestly, looking at this card, I think they delivered. This is a great card.
I absolutely agree. You know, all 9 fights, well, except for a little news we got this morning with Bo Nickel having to be rescheduled again, but
Not rescheduled, new opponent.
new opponent. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, the whole card looks to be shaping up to be very interesting. This will be the 3rd fight week in a row, coming off of 2 fight nights. Very exciting. We just finished talking about the UFC Vegas 76 recap. So let's just jump right into UFC 290.
Yeah, so I think today we're going to cover the prelims and the main card. So not the early prelims. So the first fight we're going to cover is going to be Jimmy the Brute Crute rematching Alonzo Atomic Minifield. These two fought in February of this year. A crazy fight back and forth. It ended up a draw. A lot of the reason is because Minifield got deducted a point in the last round. So you like to see these guys go from a draw and just say, hey, let's run this back. Both of them, and they both rightfully so, feel like they could have won the fight the first time. So I'm very, very excited for this fight.
Yeah, they definitely look to decide who's better here. Like you said, they fought before. I think Minifield had the advantage. He almost knocked Crute out twice.
Yeah, he came very, very close.
The bell's the only thing that saved him on the second one. But kind of flipping it on the other side, the fence is the only thing that saved Minifield against Crute taking him down. So I'm, like you, very excited to see what happens in this fight. Another interesting thing to point out here, though, we both have minus odds for these people. Minus 118, minus 108. That means the UFC and Vegas don't really know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I mean, how close the first fight was, it's hard to predict. I do have some interesting stats. Jimmy, this is his 8th, this will be his 9th UFC fight, so he's fought 8 times in the UFC. 7 of those 8 ones have not gone to the scorecard.
Right, so he's either won or lost by nothing, by other than decision, is what you're saying.
Exactly. He has 4 wins, 3 losses, all by finish. So his fights are exciting, and they get down to action. And he hasn't had a win since 2020, so 3 fights in a row, including the draw. Before that, he had 2 losses. So he's going to be this is a win Jimmy needs. Who do you have winning the fight?
I think Alonzo Minifield's going to win this one. I think, if all stays the same from the first encounter, look, it wasn't that long ago. There's more tape you can watch, but I really think they knew how the other was going into that fight, how the other was going to be attacking early on this year. I don't think anyone's really changing up their game plan. I think Jimmy is going to keep trying to submit him, wrestle him, get him on the ground, take control, and I think Minifield's going to keep trying to knock him out.
Yeah, I got Minifield winning the fight. He came very close to knocking Jimmy out the first time. I think if he connects a couple more times in this fight, he'll get the knockout. So I'm going Alonzo Minifield for my pick.
All right, moving on to Yasmin Yaregi versus Denise Gomez. This is a woman's fight, strawweight, 115 pounds. Honestly, Yasmin is considered one of the top prospects in Mexico. She's young. She's only 24 years old. She's perfect in her career. 7 KOs, 3 decisions. If I can say one thing about this whole fight is I don't think she's going to be trying to submit anybody. Based on that,
probably not.
But I will say we can't underestimate Gomez. They both show strong power. While Yasmin has 7 KOs, Gomez has 5 KOs.
Including TKO in her last fight.
Correct. So with that, even though I'm picking Yasmin as one of my picks, I don't necessarily feel that 100% confidence like I usually do going in.
Yeah, so it's both of their third fights in the UFC too. So Yasmin is 2-0, Denise is 1-1. One interesting fact I saw, Yasmin. So she was in a Mexican promotion before the UFC. and she had 3 fights in one night. Won all 3 of them, 2 by finish.
Isn't
to
that
win,
crazy?
I think it was something like Woman of the Night or something. It was something crazy like that. But that's just so impressive. 24 years old. Denise is only 23. Yasmin is the huge favorite, minus 400. I have her as.
Yeah, I actually show her as minus 460.
Yeah, so it might be getting bigger as the moments go on.
Yeah, typically when people put more money on a line, it tends to increase in that favoritism. So maybe Denise is just poised for a big upset here.
Maybe, but I don't think so. I got Yasmin. How do you say her name? Uregi?
Uregi.
I got Uregi winning the fight. I think those odds are there for a reason.
Yeah, one of the things we know is that Vegas knows.
But do they know that we know that they know?
I guess we'll find out.
I think we'll find out. All right, so let's move on to the next fight. This fight features maybe the most exciting guy on the card versus maybe the worst nickname on the card.
And why do you say that?
So it's Jack Della Maddalena.
That's not his nickname. That's just his name.
That's just his name, and he may be the most exciting fighter on this card.
Okay.
He is fighting a late replacement, so you got to give him props for that. Josiah Harrell, nickname Muscle Hamster. Maybe the worst nickname I've seen. Muscle Hamster does come in 7-0, but he does come in a huge underdog. I have the odds when I looked minus 950 for Jack, plus 600 for the Muscle Hamster. Della Maddalena, I mean, he gets finishes all the time. All 4 of his UFC wins are first round finishes, so that's crazy. He has 14 straight wins. I just think he comes in, he puts on a show. He's going to do something crazy where he knocks this dude out or something crazy.
While I also have Jack Della Maddalena picked.
It's a tough one to say.
Right, it's almost a tongue twister in itself. Jack Della Maddalena. While I do have him picked, my odds are wildly different than yours. I must have looked at it a little bit more early, or I guess earlier I looked at it. I have minus 1,600 for Jack and plus 800 for the Muscle Hamster. They must think his muscles are kind of small. But anyway.
Huge step up in competition for him.
I will say, yeah, if you're going from a different division or a different
league.
His
first UFC fight, by the way.
Right, you're going from a different league to the UFC. There are definitely levels to it. Outside of this fight, though, one thing I do want to interject. Josiah did replace Sean Brady, who had elbow bursitis, basically staph infection on his elbow. Pretty bad, but the only reason I'm bringing it up is because Jack said something kind of funny about it when he had to withdraw. Because it was a septic, staph infection, Jack only said, oh, he withdrew because he shit the bed, which to me was just kind of funny. That kind of confidence moving forward, I really think Jack is going to win this fight. I have him as my pick. It's a heavy favorite. There's no point putting money on it in my eyes.
Yeah, I have him winning the fight too. I think he wins the first round KO.
Yeah. Speaking of first round KO, Madalena's got 4 first round finishes. 4-0 in the UFC, and they're all 4 rounds.
All first round finishes,
right?
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive.
Last one, rear naked choke. 3 before that, TKOs. One thing that's crazy I saw about him. He started his career 0-2, and he's won 14 straight since then. So I don't know what happened. I don't know who he fought in those first 2 fights, but that's crazy.
It's kind of like those pictures you see. A fighter gets a haircut, and then he doesn't get beat for like 10 years.
Yeah, just a different guy.
Yeah, it's like, all right, cool. And now moving on to the featured prelim of the night, Robbie Ruthless Lawler. I know everybody's heard that name a few times before. And Nico the Hybrid Price. This, I think we differ on opinion here. I'm very interested in this fight. I know Robbie's had a long career. Nico's, he's still had a decently long career, just not 45 fights worth of length. Robbie Lawler comes in at plus 220. Nico comes in minus 225. We do know that Lawler's retiring at the end of this fight. So that that's very good for him. Long career. 46 is a hell of a number. Yeah.
A legend.
Definitely going to be in the Hall of Fame if he isn't already. But I really just to say I didn't think Lawler was gonna fight again after his last fight. You know.
But looking back at his last fight, he lost by TKO late in the second round. But man, those first two rounds, he looked good on the feet. He looked like he still had the boxing in him. It was just he's a little bit older. Both of these guys come in really struggling recently. Uh, Robbie Lawler's lost 5 out of his last 6. His only win is against Nick Diaz, who came back from however long of a
Hiatus, if you want to call it that.
Not the most impressive win. Nico Price only has 1 win in his last 5 fights, so he's also struggling. Both these guys need the dub. If you watch both of their last fights, they both lost by TKO, but they both still fought. They both stood in there. They took chances. They had big shots. They just couldn't last. They were facing killers each. I actually have Robbie Lawler winning this fight, and he's actually my first bet. I have him at plus 220. I think this is a perfect fight for him. It's going to be an exciting fight. It's going to be a great way to end your career, a great career. He's going to come in. I think he's going to get the knockout. I have Robbie Lawler winning the fight.
That's good. And I didn't think about that until this very moment. Even though I am taking Nico Price, I don't have any bets on it. But this is going to be my last opportunity to make any money on Robbie Lawler.
A legend. All right, so let's move on to the main card of the evening. First fight on the main card, Bo Nickel versus another late replacement. This is the second fight to have somebody drop out late. He was supposed to face Tresean Gore. Huge favorite in that fight. I think he would have easily won. Instead, he's facing a UFC, a guy making his UFC debut, Val Woodburn, the Animal. Comes in 7-0, 5 KOs, 2 decisions, but he has not faced any kind of competition like this. I think we're both big fans of Bo Nickel. The little bit we've seen of him. I mean, he's an elite wrestler. I don't know if anybody in the UFC can wrestle with him. I think he's going to come out. I think he's going to dominate. First round finish. I think Bo Nickel either strangles this dude, TKOs him. He's going to get a hold of him and then not let go.
I actually 1,000% agree. Originally, I had this fight as my first bet of the night. I was going to take Bo Nickel's submission against Tresean Gore. He was already the favorite, minus 1,600 on my paper, plus 750 to Gore. Gore's only losses were in the UFC. Kind of going back to that thing when we were talking about how there's levels to the league. With Val Woodburn, this doesn't change anything. This will be his UFC debut. He was fighting in what other league before?
Some regional Southern league.
He was right. It was out of Florida, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So good for him taking the fight. This will get his name out there 100%.
Yeah, props to him because that is a good career move.
But I am actually going to continue and lock in my first bet of the night at still a Bo Nickel submission. They didn't release the odds yet, so I don't have them. But the second they release them, I'm placing it because the sooner you place, the better the odds. Moving on to our next fight, we have Jalen the Tarantula Turner fighting Dan the Hangman Hooker. This
2 lanky ass motherfuckers.
Right, dude. These tall ass dudes here.
So 155.
Lightweight fight. Last time Hooker was out. I mean, not last time. It's almost every time Hooker fights, he fights a legend in his own right. Some of his only losses were to Poirier. Who else?
Islam. He lost to Arnold Allen in 2 fights ago. Lost to Michael Chandler. So he is a classic case of there's levels to this where he'll beat a lot of guys, but I love Dan Hooker, but when he faces the elite of the elite, he seems to fall short every time, just a little bit.
Yeah. Hooker did win his last fight by TKO.
He did win his last fight, but he's lost 4 out of his last 6.
Right. And now, like I just said, he did lose most of those to big names, but it does go to show, is this where he's like on the cusp of greatness, or is he fading?
And his last 3 losses are all by finish as well. So he's been getting finished.
Right.
And Jalen comes in. The only time he goes to the card, he loses. So he's 13-6. He's He's only had 3 fights go to the scorecard. He's lost all 3.
Right, and he's been knocked out 3 times as well.
He's 6-3 in the UFC. He does win by submission and knockout though. So his last 4 fights have all been by finish. 3 of them submission. So he can go out there, get finishes. Jalen does come in a minus 250 favorite. I have him as Hooker at plus 210. I'm taking Jalen Turner in the fight. I think he's just going to beat Dan Hooker. Honestly, I think it's 2 tough guys, 2 lanky guys, 2 good strikers. I think Jalen just gets it done.
Okay, look, and while I appreciate where you're coming from, I actually just started realizing that this is now it's only the 3rd week in season 3, but this is going to be the week where we kind of start separating. We've had a few differences in picks already, and I'm actually taking as my pick and my second bet of the night. I was able to lock in Dan Hooker at plus 186 money line, and obviously him for the pick if I'm willing to put money on it.
All right, so let's move on to the next fight. Robert the Reaper Whitaker, also a.k.a. Bobby Knuckles, taking on Dracus Duplessis Still Knox. This, I think, is the fight I'm most excited for on this card. I really, really enjoy watching both of these 2 guys fight. Whitaker comes in 24-6. He's won 13 out of his last 15 fights. His only 2 losses are against Israel Adesanya.
Right. I was actually going to say the same thing. His only 2 losses at 185 total, though.
Israel Adesanya.
Correct.
So he's an elite fighter, and he's taking on Dracus, who comes in 19-2, 5-0 in the UFC.
Wins like Brunson, Till, and Tavares.
He has some impressive wins. He's slowly been upgrading his opponents, getting better and better opponents, and he's been looking good. Supposedly, he had a deviated septum fix, so he can breathe better.
And
which
with that,
was probably his biggest, you would say his biggest flaw in the fights you watch is that he gets tired. So
yeah.
That supposedly is supposed to help that. But this is a giant step up in competition.
It is. I'll say walking up to try to fight somebody like Robert Whitaker, is no small task. One thing I'll say, even though Dracus is 19-2, he's still got plus 285 odds, giving Whitaker the minus 400 favorite. For somebody who, it's not like this is Dracus' first fight in the UFC. For Whitaker to get those kind of odds,
well, I mean, Whitaker is. If it wasn't for Israel Adesanya, Whitaker would be regarded as one of the greatest fighters of all time.
Correct.
Because he's been that dominant against everybody else.
So I'm very interested to see what happens on this fight. Neither one are old. I think Whitaker's, 32?
Whitaker 32, Dracus is only 29.
Yeah.
So he's just coming into those prime years.
One of the things to look at for this, I think, whoever, regardless of the winner of this fight, you think the winner gets a title shot?
If it's Duplessis, 100%. If it's Whitaker, I don't know if Adesanya wants to fight him a 3rd time, but he might be forced to. But I think it's the 2 best guys right now besides Israel Adesanya in the division. Who do you have winning the fight?
I actually took Dracus winning the fight. The reason being, or one of the reasons being, is that he did get the deviated septum fixed, so he should be able to take in more oxygen. So, one of our complaints, like we said, through the times that seeing him fight was that he would get gassed. At this point, if he can breathe better, he may not get gassed. My wife had her deviated septum fixed, and ever since that happened, she's slept better, feels better. I couldn't imagine what it does for like an athlete.
That's all well and good, but I think there's levels to this, and we're about to see that again on Saturday. I think Whitaker beats him like he's beating everybody else but Israel Adesanya at 185. I think Whitaker actually knocks him out. Whitaker's my pick. My second bet of the night is the under for the fight, under 2.5 rounds at minus 135, and I have Whitaker winning the fight.
Ooh, and while I don't like to have bets on the same fights as you, this is actually my 3rd bet of the night. I took Dracus Duplessis money line plus 285. Now on to the co-main event of the night. We have
First title fight
First title fight.
First title fight for the podcast too, so that's a big deal.
Right.
We got to remember this.
Let's we'll hit a little soundboard.
That'll be a trivia question one day.
One day. So listen, we have a long-awaited rematch. This is going to be Brandon the Assassin Baby Moreno and Alexander the Cannibal Pantoja 3. This will be the third time they fight total. Flyweight, 125 pounds.
And the crazy thing is the challenger, Pantoja, won both of the first two fights against Moreno.
Right, in 2018 and 2016.
The champ.
The first one in 2016 was an exhibition.
It was on the Ultimate Fighter.
But that fight specifically was when he got choked. Correct. Yeah. So in 2018, it was decision.
But it was still it was a good decision.
Right. So since then, I think what really has happened is Moreno has found really his flight in the UFC. You know, he's the champ. He lost the title, won it back. You know, he's overcome adversity. Not to say that Pantoja hasn't done anything. He's 25-5. You know, he's got 8 KO wins, 10 submissions, 7 decisions.
He's never gotten finished.
But there's probably a reason here that Moreno's minus 200.
Well, Moreno's just been so good lately. One thing to look out, this is Moreno out of his last 5 fights. 4 out of his last 5 fights have all been against Davis and Figueiredo.
Yeah.
He won 2 of those, drew 1, lost 1. But so it's just something, he is fighting somebody different. He's never been finished either. So neither guy has ever been finished.
Right. With Moreno being 21-6, he has 11 submissions, 5 KOs. But just to say something about that, they're very similar fighters in their style. They can both knock each other out. They can both submit each other. And listen, they both only lose by decision. And I don't think we're getting a draw here.
Who do you have winning the fight?
I think Brandon Moreno is going to win the fight. I don't feel comfortable putting any money on it just because Pantoja's won twice against him.
Yeah.
And it's a title fight. I like to stay clear of title fights because these are the times where the contender, in this case Pantoja, or in the main event's case Rodriguez, this is where a guy needs to be able to and be willing to fight for his life. You know, in the last second, still be willing to put it all out there, throw his hands, do whatever it takes. And on that one, that's when the odds really just kind of get funky for me in my head.
Yeah, the title fights are definitely a different beast than a regular fight. It kind of shows who's real and who's not a lot of the times.
And don't forget, when you're looking at an over on a title fight, you're not looking at over 1.5. You're looking at over 2.5 rounds. Which,
speaking to that, I actually have the over in this fight.
Okay.
This is my my last bet of the night. I have the over 3.5 rounds at minus 170. I think Moreno wins the fight. I think he shows how much he's improved. Pantoja's also improved since the last time they fought, but Moreno has taken giant leaps forward, much like Charles Oliveira, where they had they had a few losses early in their career and just built off of that, and then now have become something totally different. So I think Moreno goes out there. I think he gets it done by unanimous decision. He's just going to beat him up the whole fight.
So that's your third bet of the night is Moreno over? Or just the over
just
total?
Over 3.5 rounds.
Okay.
Minus 170.
Okay. So listen, that's great. I actually completely agree with you. They have, I think, 12 total decision victories between the two of them. You know, and we don't even need that from you. We only need, over half the fight.
And they also both have 11 total decision losses.
That's true.
So I think this is definitely looking like a decision fight to me.
And now moving on to the final title fight of the night, the main event, Alex the Great, or Alexander the Great Volkanovski.
Great nickname.
Right. 145 pounds, flyweight. He's going to be fighting Yair El Pantera Rodriguez. Both guys coming into this fight, heavy win-to-loss ratio, 25-2 for Alex, 12 KOs, 3 submissions, 10 decisions. 15-3 for Yair, 5 KOs, 4 submissions, 6 decisions. Kind of proving either one can get it done either way when they need to. Shows you kind of how the other is leaning. Yair's kind of an even spread, but he hasn't had as many fights. Alex has 12 KOs, 10 decisions, so you can kind of tell he's not trying to win it on the ground every time.
But he can.
Circa Brian Ortega not being able to choke him out. I will say up front, though, I may be one of the biggest Brian Ortega haters ever. So moving on from that. Volk only has 2 losses. One of them is against Islam.
He only has 1 loss in the UFC, though.
Right. I was getting to that.
12-0 at 145. He has not lost at 145 in the UFC. His only loss, as you just said, was when he moved up to fight Islam Makhachev for the 155 belt. When he does have a lot of decisions. I know you said the 10 decisions, but he's the kind of guy when he does get decisions,
it's dominant.
It's
decision.
a dominant, and it's an obvious, like, I love Max Holloway. He's probably my second favorite fighter. He dominated him the last couple times they fought. And it was obvious they both went to the cards, and it was obvious Volk won. But saying that, Yair, he's a guy, he's an exciting fighter to watch. He gets crazy KOs. He gets crazy submissions. This is his big chance. This is the chance for Yair to really make a name for himself, become another Mexican champion in the UFC. I really like Yair Rodriguez, but I think Volk gets it done in this fight. He's minus 390. I think Volk, honestly, I have him as the number 1 pound-for-pound guy in the UFC. I personally think he won the fight against Islam. I had the scorecards in his favor. I think he's maybe the best fighter in the UFC right now. I think he goes out there. I think he gets it done. I think it's going to be a great fight. Like I said, I really like Yair, but I think Volk is just on a whole nother level than anybody else, including Max Holloway, who's one of my favorite fighters.
Right, I agree there. With Volk coming off the loss to Islam, like you said, you had him on the cards being favorited. Talking about decisions, that's his only decision, right? Loss?
Only decision loss. Correct.
Right.
He's only had 2 losses, I mean.
Right, yeah, the other, it was not in the UFC. But with that, his 10 decision wins, the last fight, like we mentioned, Brian Ortega, he had him in a deep choke. And one of the things you have to think about with Volk is that he kept cool under that pressure of a deep choke, and he was able to just think his way out of it. It's another guy you'll say of the difference from the haircut.
Yeah, once he went bald, this dude went on a whole nother level.
Right. He increased.
He went from maybe the best guy at 145 when he had hair, then he became like, maybe he is one of the best fighters ever.
Correct. He doesn't look like he's slowing down, but in credit to Yair, his loss to Max Holloway, it's nothing bad to say about it. You know,
it was honestly a good performance. It was just Max is that good.
Correct.
And Volk is that much better than Max.
And that's one of the biggest problems with both weight classes, 145 pounds, 155 pounds, is it seems like there's a gatekeeper every time a new fighter walks in. There's 7 levels of gatekeepers just to get to the top 10.
You could go back to one of the fights we talked about earlier, Robert Whittaker. That's what he is at 185.
Right.
He's lost to the champ a couple times, but nobody else can beat him. This is the same thing, I think, with Max Holloway, because Volk is that good.
So I think outside of some crazy upset knockout or some crazy upset submission, I think Volk retains his title. I think he keeps the belt here. What do you think?
I agree. I have Volk winning, probably by decision, but I think it's, again, like you said, a decision where we all know who won the fight.